Thank you all for joining the session today. We appreciate your time. We're going to be focused on Epic and Oracle Health EHR speed and reliability. Of course, we won't just be focused on Epic and Oracle Health. It's really anybody who's running an EHR, which should be everybody on this call. For today, we're joined by Ryan Oliver. Ryan spent almost a decade or so as a research director at KLAS. And while he was there, he played a pivotal role in advancing healthcare IT solutions. And now, Ryan is responsible for driving innovation and improving Goliath Technology Solutions to meet the needs of healthcare IT. We also have Thomas Charlton joining us. He is the founder and CEO of Goliath Technologies. He's also an industry veteran in the healthcare technology space, having run multiple software companies with various technologies. So he's taken his industry experience and knowledge, and he's built the industry's leading IT EUC observability company. For the session today, we want everybody to be engaged, so please feel free to ask lots of questions. In fact, there's a question and answer panel in your GoToWebinar toolbar. If you just click on that, you can type your questions in there. We will do our best to get to all of your questions before the end of the session. Of course, if there's anything that we're unable to get to or we run out of time, we'll certainly follow up with you afterwards. We also will have a quick poll and then a final, after the webinar is over, survey if you just take a few moments to fill that out. So as far as the session today, we're going to be defining the speed and reliability problem. Talk about speed and reliability, but what does that actually mean and what's the scope of the problem? And when we do that, we'll also be looking at quantifying the issue, just seeing exactly how large of an issue it is across health systems, really worldwide. Then we're going to look at some ways to troubleshoot and improve clinician experience when using the EHRs, and then we're going to jump into some Q&A time where you'll have an opportunity to get any questions from our presenters that you have. And again, go ahead and type those in at any point during the session into the GoToWebinar toolbar, and then we will go ahead and wrap up. So before we jump into the content, we're going to do a quick poll. Give me just a moment to launch it. Okay. So it's an easy yes or no poll. Do you measure EHR speed and reliability today? Is that something that you guys look at? We'll give you just a few minutes to fill it out.
Yeah, Carrie, I love this question. Reminds me of when years ago at KLAS when we started the Arch Collaborative, you know, the statement was, you can't improve what you don't measure.
Exactly, exactly. All right. So everybody has answered already. We have got an exact 50-50 split of people who say yes, they measure it today, and no, they don't. So we'll get into a little bit more about that, but it'd be great to understand how you guys are doing that, those of you who are measuring, how you're doing that as we move through the session. All right, with that, Ryan, I'm going to invite you to jump in and get us kicked off with our content.
Yeah, you bet. Good to see you, Carrie. Thomas, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, thank you. How are you?
Good, good. I think we need to get some speed and reliability guys, teachers for these webinars. What do you think?
I think the poll sort of kicks everything off, does it not? I mean, the poll is talking about speed and reliability. I think when you look at KLAS and the research that they do and where you've been for the last decade, right? And what Goliath does is we're kind of together combining the human experience, which is what KLAS and the lived experience, if you will, of the surveys with empirical evidence and data, actual data around speed and reliability as well, together into one common set of facts upon which to drive decision making and inform how people think about their clinicians and the experience they're having with their EHR applications. So
yeah, such a great point. And I like what you said about combining empirical and in between the two of us, Thomas, we're able to combine with my background in research, there's a lot of perception studies. Like, what is the perception, the experience that the clinicians have? How are they perceiving it and experiencing, feeling it? And then your background on the actual empirical data, the technical data behind what's really going on at the endpoint. We're going to combine some of that here today, aren't we?
Yeah.
And so, as Kiri said, to start off, I want to share with you first just a little bit about the scope of the issue and identifying it, and especially for just a minute, I think it's critical to take a minute on the outsized impact that this has on the clinician experience and their ability to deliver quality care, to be efficient, also to avoid burnout. Extremely hot topic, important topic right now. And then Thomas, from there, stay close with us, because Thomas is also going to go into, all right, here's how you identify those problems and actually troubleshoot those. Here are specific health systems that are doing it well, and what are some of those things that they're doing. And we'll also, of course, invite you, if any of you, the most important thing is that you get a lot out of this. So if any of you have questions, you can pop those in. You can also meet with us, request time with us individually. We're happy to do that after the webinar here today. First, though, a little bit of background about the research. As Thomas mentioned, I was in KLAS for around a decade, so I have a strong research background. This was just a really important topic close to my heart during my research time. I spent a lot of it focused on infrastructure-related things, IT, but more specifically, it was important to me when we started the Arch Collaborative at KLAS to look at how this impacts the clinician especially. So for those of you that aren't familiar with KLAS, I looked at the attendee list, and some of you are CMIOs and on the clinical side, informatics directors. Some of you more on the IT side of the house, working with the systems. And so I think what I'll talk about next is very important to both of those groups. But if you're not familiar with KLAS yet, just a very short background. I spent, like I said, about a decade there. The main thing we were known for is doing the best-in-class reports on vendors' performance in healthcare. So we're talking to long-form interviews, 27,000 interviews a year, mostly healthcare leaders. The vast majority of those are C-level executives. And with that, you get a lot of insight, a lot of knowledge. And we started hearing a lot of talk in the industry about, hey, this EHR is really good, it's rating well, but then you're hearing about doctors who are hating it and having a very difficult time. I'm going back years now. So we started the Arch Collaborative, setting out to, for the first time as an industry, not only measure, like the question Kiri asked, do you measure currently, not just the speed and reliability, but the overall experience with the EHR? One, do you measure that, and is there an industry benchmark? At the time, about 8 years ago, people didn't even know where they stood against the rest of the industry. And the neat thing with this initiative at KLAS, which I was a part of the first presentations with it, was that we were able to launch this initially to 40 organizations and then later to over 350 health systems that are measuring with KLAS their EHR experience. And so imagine this for a second. We set out. Now it's over 500,000. I say we, as of a few weeks ago, I'm now with Goliath, but for a decade, this is what we did at KLAS. But picture this for a second, 500,000 physicians surveys. And so the data that we'll share with you here is indisputable. And we ask those specific questions about that you see on the screen about their EHR experience. And some of them are about reliability, and some of them are about functionality. Does it enable you to provide great care? Out of that, we ended up, I'll talk about the House of Success here a little bit later, but we ended up finding out that there was massive variation in the EHR experience. So you'll have to bear with me on some of the charts that we created at KLAS. We try to put a lot of information, and there's a lot of statisticians there, but put a lot of information into a small deck here. But this is probably the most condensed bar chart you'll ever see. Every little blue line on there represents a health system. And to the right, that is representing how their EHR experience scores. So the further to the right, the better the score. The further to the left, the low score. And you can look at the variation. Now, the lines that are over there on the right, that shows you the EHR vendor And the black one, for example, that is the EHR vendor that the #1 scoring health system with the best EHR satisfaction purchased. Down the line that draws down to the bottom, that is another health system on the same EHR. And then the second line and the third line. So here's my point. What is the point of this slide, if you think about it? What is the point of this data? Here's the main point. The variation has very little to do with which EHR you buy. In other words, I'll put it plainly, you can't buy Epic, for example, or whoever, and guarantee to have high satisfaction. There is an Epic health system right at the top at that of EHR satisfaction, and there's some at the very bottom, period. Same with Oracle Health Turner, same with Meditech, and the rest. So imagine this for a second. So I'll repeat that statement. Buying a better EHR, whatever it might be, does not necessarily put you in a position where your physicians are happy with the EHR. There is still and will still be massive variation in that overall experience. So when people realize this was our first 50,000 surveys, the big question was, okay, then what is the difference? I mean, why are those at the bottom on the same EHR at the top? And that's through looking through the data, interviewing thousands of interviews with those health system leaders, finding out what are those at the top doing differently from those at the bottom. And KLAS came up with, you see on the left, the KLAS House of Success. And it starts with the foundation being system speed and reliability. We found out education was very important. Shared ownership is huge, right? But also meeting the user's needs. There's things like personalization settings. Those are the main pillars, and there's quite a bit of nuance within each pillar. But what we also found is that if you're sitting on a system with poor speed, with latency, where physicians, have you ever heard this? Thomas, I'm sure you've heard this in your many discussions with health systems. But we've got physicians complaining to IT that they're spending an hour during a shift waiting for login issues, waiting for response time, badging in issues like that. Comes up all the time.
It comes up all the time, those that complain, and I think what's also concerning, especially to executives, is the fact that many don't complain, right? The unreported issues where people just sort of move on and think it's business as usual, or in some cases, because the EHR is better at another hospital where they have privileges, they move their cases and their workloads to the other health system. You know, those types of things absolutely happen, you know? Yeah.
In fact, that reminds me, one of the shocking things to the health systems when we first hosted the surveys for them was that KLAS was doing it, and they felt like their voice was going to be heard, and the response rate to the surveys was the highest they'd ever seen. Really showing that they had been quietly suffering, many of them,
right,
not saying anything when they finally got a chance. So the key here is to listen, but understand what's the difference. Here's the thing. With the speed and reliability on this slide here, I have seen health systems spend millions of dollars on education programs, right? So for example, KLAS could point you to 15 consulting firms. Pretty much any consulting firm that does major EHR implementations can help you with a physician education program, right? And there's a lot of neat things that come out of the data about educating. But no matter how much education you do, no matter how much of a voice you give the clinicians with shared ownership and the change management, if you're sitting on a system with a slow, it's not going to matter if you're sitting on a system that's slow. And how many systems in healthcare, how many health systems have major speed and reliability issues? That should be a poll question. We didn't have that one though, did we, Carrie? But if you ask yourself, if you had to take a guess in your mind, I'll tell you the answer, it's the majority. So it's around close to 60% have major issues to the point where if they don't improve it, they're not going to be able to get to a good place with clinician satisfaction. And probably another 20% have a lot of room to improve. There are about 15 to 20% of health systems where they're in a pretty strong place, but it's a small percentage. So that's why I think you're here. You probably have recognized this issue, maybe don't know how to measure it, or if you know how to measure it, don't know how to fix it. So that's what we're going to spend the time on. To drill a little bit further into the correlation between speed and reliability, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here too much, between speed and reliability and overall satisfaction. This chart is not what it first appears. Basically, it's a correlation chart, not a total number chart. So if people strongly agree, if a clinician says, yes, I agree the EHR, strongly agree it's fast, their overall net experience score with the EHR averages an 86.1. Now, it comes down, if they say agree, to a 67. If they're sort of indifferent and they're like, it needs some improvement, now you're scoring it. No matter what else you've done, now you're at a 22.9 score, and then it goes to disagree, it gets to a -8. You actually have a 138-point difference when the clinician strongly agrees that response time is good versus strongly disagrees. This is just staggering. I wish we could explain this chart more quickly and actually share it with the whole world. But if you look at this for a second, another complex plot chart, but it's measuring two things: impact and then the average score, high or low. So I want everybody for a second to just forget the horizontal line up and down. Look at the dots, just left to right. Imagine that they're squished onto a flat line. So the horizontal line there is measuring impact. So the furthest to the left is low impact. So it's measuring against one critical question, which is this system good? Is this a good system that's reliable? And then as you move, if you work on, for example, workflow training with clinicians, that's a little further to the left. So you can improve that, but it has less impact than the other things focusing on. So the furthest to the right means if you fix that or improve it or it gets worse, it has a higher impact on that critical question. What's interesting here is which dot is furthest to the right. Look at the outlier. It is response time. If I were a health system and I wanted to pick low-hanging fruit, now up and down vertically, guys, this shows you what the average score is. So like integration, for example, usually scores pretty high, but is also very impactful. But the three that score low that are also high impact. And it's interesting, if you look at what they are, investment in the market reflects this. Which EHR vendor, also efficiency. If they're scoring how efficient they are, it's low, efficient related questions. But system response time scores low and is farthest to the right. Look at efficiency for a second and think about this. How many health systems, I'll just tell you, I've talked to, every week talking to health systems. In the last year, I've noticed every health system I've spoken to, almost without exception, close to every, has either recently purchased an ambient speech system or is in the process of purchasing one. So that's like your DAX, your Microsoft Nuance DAX system, your Abridge, Suki. That's for clinician efficiency with documentation, because people actually instinctively, even when they don't have the data, know they've got to improve that. You see people replacing their EHR all the time, right? But to the right, system response time is the most impactful. And that's the one that we want to focus on. The qualitative data here from 500,000 clinicians, they also comment, and this is kind of what we hear a lot: extremely long lag times during each click from an Epic clinician there at the top. A clinician on Meditech says slow, unresponsive. It freezes from Oracle Health. It's hard to sign in. This one over on the right, I want to highlight here, says, a physician says, the lag time between screens is infuriating. And this is not uncommon, by the way. Thomas, we were on a call this week where a health system said, our CIO wants us to fix this now. Remember that?
Yep.
And he says, currently we're measuring it essentially with a stopwatch. It's so archaic. But they're not measuring their lag times. But this clinician did it kind of with a stopwatch. He said, I worked a 12-hour shift. I was waiting for the computer to load. Every time I placed orders, I timed it during a 12-hour shift. And I'm putting in orders each time. During a 12-hour shift, I waited 57 minutes. And, you know, for years, people would dismiss that physicians were complainers or whiners. But I think it's time to listen. We're seeing major issues with burnout. What would that 57 minutes do for that clinician? What is that? Seeing a few more patients, revenue for the health system, delivering better patient care, more focus. Maybe they could work an 11-hour shift and get more sleep or exercise and reduce burnout instead of a 12-hour shift, give them an hour of their day back. But those kind of results, if you can improve that, are absolutely huge. In the qualitative data, the top requests we got from clinicians were two things. Please reduce our documentation burden and infrastructure related, which is synonymous with speed and reliability. It's the same bucket. So those tied, yeah.
I was just going to say, you know, back to the commenting on that slide with the physician, one of the things that you'll hear when you're talking to whether it's clinicians or those that they report, they complain to, is the fact that when speed and reliability issues happen or occur and a patient is in the room, that the impact on patient care is dramatic and therefore it's the most frustrating, right? So having it take a few extra clicks to download a lab report or something like that, that's annoying, right? But frustrating happens when you're experiencing speed and reliability when you're attempting to deliver patient care. You know, you're moving from one room to another very, very quickly and trying to see a certain number of patients, and a 30-second to a minute delay trying to access specific lab reports or something like that. That sort of delay is really, really infuriating.
Yeah, it's so, I just can imagine it's so critical that we listen to this physician voice. It's one of the metrics, though, that we haven't seen improve much over the years. It took a dip with remote workers during COVID, as you can see there. But no presentation is good without a good analogy, Thomas. I'll do this quickly, but I think it's important. That is actually me mountain biking about 9 years ago. Don't ask why we had a camera crew there. But in this analogy, that bike, I probably spent too much money on it. I live out in Utah. I'm here at flew out to Philly this week at the Goliath headquarters. But let's say that bike represents your EHR system. And the rider, that's me there, represents the physician, the end user riding that bike. And let's call this, we've just implemented the EHR. We've launched it. Let's say that's the go live. We are now off and in the air and to the races. We bought the best EHR money can buy, the full integrated system. And what could possibly go wrong, right? Well, I think any of you CMIOs that are physicians on the call, I think the technical term for this is a clavicle fracture. But obviously, we had a major crash there. Yes, this is actually a broken collarbone of mine years ago, caught on film. Oops, I think the YouTube video went viral. Had a nice visit to Intermountain Healthcare. But here's the point in me sharing this catastrophe with you. I made some mistakes that morning. I usually check some general maintenance on the bike before a ride. I usually check the shock pressure, tire pressure, a few basic things. I rushed through it and just didn't do it that day. And if I examine what happened, you can see the shock fully compressed in the front there. The shock pressure was low and the tire pressure was low. Real simple things. In fact, two free things, air. And when I landed, that tire, you can see the puff of dust to the left. The sidewall of the tire actually ripped off the wheel because the pressure was low. The air blew out and the rim dug in. and send me over the bars. Point is, maintenance. Really simple. Typically, the speed and reliability issues are not on the server side. They're typically on the client side, we found. In addition to that, and that's what I want Thomas to talk about, I'll share this with you. With all the years of research, I found that the issues, when they're technical in nature in the infrastructure, they're actually easy to fix. That's the good news. But for most people, they're hard to find. So therein lies the problem, is how do you find it and how do you improve it? By the way, this is why I came to Goliath, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Thomas, but I spent years at KLAS researching this, and we had our limitations in our research. We could tell a health system when they had a problem, for sure. We could give them some minimal best practices, but remember, our limitation is that it's perception study, and I think it's so critical to combine that with empirical data. And to make a long story short, I started about 4 years ago, ran across a major health system who had the highest improved score year over year, had a 26-point improvement in speed and reliability when they measured with the ARCH Collaborative with their physicians, and then they had the highest just overall improvement. It was the most improvement we had seen to that point. And so I called, when I saw the speed and reliability score improve, I called their CTO. He says, I'm using this Goliath tool. It's made a massive difference. It comes up at 2 or 3 more health systems, and I finally called Thomas and started to shed a light on what Goliath is doing. And still to this day, when you look at the house of success and speed and reliability, there's really only one vendor to this point that KLAS is pointing to that's had a major impact here, and it's Goliath. And so I want you, the group here, listen closely. I think you'll get a lot out of this. That might have been a bit of a long sort of setup. I do think it's important. I did that for a reason, that we remember as we learn how to do this and improve it, what it's impacting the clinicians, and that it's impacting their care. We really want them to get to a point where they answer one question with a yes. Does the EHR help you deliver better patient care? And if they say no, it doesn't, the speed and reliability is bad, then they're going to say no to the latter, or to the former question. So with that, Thomas, would you take us through some of the ways that Goliath is helping these health systems that we've seen to improve their speed and reliability?
Sure. Thanks, Ryan, and thanks for the setup and sort of quantifying the problem. To introduce this, we're a software company, but we also provide EHR speed and reliability improvement programs, and they're really customized for organizations that are having speed and reliability issues and want to try to impact those positively and do it quickly. So I'm going to go through a couple of different slides, one with Oracle, one with Epic, though we have plenty for Meditech and other organizations. And I'll talk about the challenges both in that they're experiencing, as well as the challenges that occur when you're trying to remediate the issues, and then what the solutions were. The challenge with Atlanticare, which remains a customer of ours now, going on 6-7 years, is they received a poor NPS survey, and they also had limited clinician participation. But those that did respond were not pleased with the performance of the application. They tried to then do a little bit more, gather more data, but they realized they had inconsistent clinician complaints. So there were no ways to find patterns that were discernible. You'll see this as a common theme when you're dealing with sort of the lived experience that people have, self-reporting, as opposed to data and analytics, right? And so they lacked actionable feedback. They had some gut instincts, they had some survey feedback, they had tickets they could look at, past complaints, but they didn't have anything that was actionable, anything that they could sort of look at to pinpoint the root cause of a particular issue, or for that matter, really frame up what the issues were. Are these broad issues impacting many, many physicians or users, or are they loud issues impacting just a few? How do you quantify those? Their analysis of their on-premises infrastructure was that it was performing well. Consequently, Epic or Oracle, before that Cerner, being a hosted application, they escalated almost all the tickets to Oracle Health. So on the next slide, when you're talking about Oracle, or frankly any hosted application, it could be Epic hosted as well, it could be any hosted application, clinical or enterprise. When you host an application, if a problem happens, the perception, not reality, but the perception is that if there is a problem with that application, the root cause is the application in the hosted environment, and the fixes to the problems that are being experienced are all in the hosted environment. Well, reality on the next slide is much more complex. Those connections are going through many times the local data center. Other applications come into play. Certainly, you've got the user, the device, the Wi-Fi connection they're on, whether it's a home connection or at a surgery center or the hospital, and then various types of infrastructure in between. So it's a complicated mesh of technologies that have to work in concert. Though totally unrelated, they have to all be functioning well in concert to be able to deliver a good end user experience. So it is incredibly challenging. So what Goliath does, we have a unique partnership, business and technical partnership with Oracle that gives us the ability to deploy our technology in the Oracle data center, not to further monitor it, but to access the end user experience data that's only available through specific APIs for the desktop virtualization solution they're using. It's the access to those APIs within the data center that give us the ability to be able to see end to end from the minute a clinician attempts to initiate a connection to the Millennium application, through the logon process and as they're using the application. So we're able to say how many clinicians are having issues, the frequency of those issues, the duration of those issues, and the potential root causes. All of that telemetry comes from a technology like ours. So the result, after we did this analysis, which took 68 days, by the way, so we were able to deploy our technology in a matter of hours and then start collecting data. So not only did we collect data, I think those of you that are used to EHR consulting engagements know that 68 days is an incredibly short period of time to actually have actionable results, okay? And what we did in those 68 days is find that about 1,200 physicians we collect the data, okay? We synthesize and we correlate the data. So we were able to understand of the 1,200 users or clinicians that were having issues, a very small number of them were the ones having the major issues. Overall, clinician experience was very, very good. So it begs the question, the NPS score was not good. And what we determined was it was not good because the only people that filled it out were people that were having issues. And it was a very small number of clinicians that filled out those issues, that had those issues. Now we were able to, though, go to clinicians that were experiencing issues and actually have one-on-one sessions with those clinicians with data. We were able to understand, for example, that where one clinician was saying that they were always having issues, the issues only occurred in the evenings in their home office, but later on in the evening, right? And this is an actual conversation we had, which is really astounding. And that's because in the clinician's den, closer to the Wi-Fi device, they weren't having any problems. But if they got called later on in the evening when there were many fewer users on the system, so you should have good performance, it was poor. And that's because their bedroom where he was logging on was so far removed from the Wi-Fi device. So we were literally able to show data, and the fact that he was having slow response times at that particular time, we were able to go and do a quick investigation and put the fixes in place, which were super easy to fix. But when a clinician responds that it's terrible all the time because the last recollection they have is trying to get on and look at an MRI at night as opposed to having to drive into the hospital, that sticks with them, right? And so it conflates. And this is what I mean by not having really actionable data whatsoever. So we were able to isolate in that example, like I said, the clinicians, locations, and the time frame. We were able to help them, give them the data to reduce mean time to remediation, primarily because now that they had that holistic data, they didn't have to escalate all their tickets up to Oracle. Now they had the data and the realization that a lot of those tickets that were attributed to Cerner or Oracle Health EHR now were actually had nothing to do with the hosted application. They had everything to do with their on-premise environment, which, by the way, if you remember a slide or two before, they had done an analysis. When we were brought in for our speed and reliability improvement program, which includes an investigation and analysis, we were informed that the problems were primarily Oracle, all right? And it was the hosted application that was the problem. There was nothing to see here when it came to the on-premises infrastructure, that it was rock solid, that it was recently updated, etc. All of which, by the way, was true. But that doesn't mean that the problems were not on premises. So now on an ongoing basis, they have on a weekly basis these types of reports produced so they can understand without, this is really, really important, without clinicians self-reporting, they can understand what clinician experience is, and they can do it in a collapsed time frame, right? So that they can take corrective action before the problem that the physician is experiencing becomes too long. So they're able to stop, they're able to find issues on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, and then quickly resolve them so you don't have a clinician having dissatisfaction or problems for an extended period of time. Ryan, it seems like you want to say something.
Oh man, I'm thinking back. You read my mind. No, I was just thinking back to when we would spend hours with health systems giving them their data and the frustration when we say you have speed and reliability issues. Well, where and what? And sometimes if we could ask the health system, okay, give us the locations of these doctors that reported, and we could say like, hey, this hospital is having more issues than your other hospital. That was about the most granular we could get. And then to see, when I come to Goliath, to see a report you showed me, Thomas, where it's like, it's not just this hospital, they're all logging in. Everyone that's having a bad experience in the red is logging into the same router on the 4th floor.
Hey, look, if I can tell you, Ryan, think about this. And Kiri, think about it in the audience. Think about this. You're able to now be proactive as opposed to reactive.
Yeah,
so you have the ability, armed with the correct data, to be able to reach out to key surgeons and physicians and say, it looks like you're having slowness. You know, Intermountain Health, this was an example they gave in their KLAS user story and survey, was that they were able to proactively reach out to surgery centers and say, it looks like you're experiencing delays at this particular time of the day. Is that the case, right? And the dynamic that now occurs between the clinical side and the IT side, when you have a common set of set of facts, and IT now has the insights to be proactive. That dynamic changes, right? There's a level of respect there now, not that there wasn't before, but there's an enhanced level of respect that the IT team is on top of it, right?
Yeah, and the IT team to be armed with this, to at least be able to say, hey, it's sometimes it's going to be at your house, and know that before you call that clinician. But also, one of the things you mentioned is that sometimes clinicians only remember the bad experience, right? Well, think about this. One of the Goliath clients that I saw you speak with is once they had the data, they started using their internal marketing team to actually show the clinicians what they were doing. I thought that was so critical to market to the clinicians, say, hey, here's how much it's improved, so that those clinicians can say, you know what? The bad experience I had was 6 months ago. It has gotten better.
Right.
And then to give them real data behind it, and to build that relationship where there's a lot more trust between the clinicians and IT is huge. So I hope the IT folks that are on this webinar take a note from that, and maybe you're already doing some of those things, but I hope this tool and this concept gives you some ideas of ways that you can improve that relationship between the two parties.
So on the next example, we move to the University of Kansas Health System. Now, this is a health system that's running Epic. The challenge they had was very specific, right? It was very long logon times to the Epic EHR, and they were flooded with issues. There was simply so they knew they had a problem. This wasn't one where they had to frame up how many people were having a problem. They knew through the use of feedback tools, etc., that they were having problems. But there was no way to isolate the root cause of the performance issues. And so they had no choice, because they didn't have the right data, but to be reactive rather than proactive, right? Which is not a great place to be. So what they did is they brought in our solution. Again, this was a performance improvement program that incorporates our insights and things like that, but the backbone or the foundation of it is technology, because we need to leverage the technology to extract data. And here we brought together three components, right? End user experience, the delivery infrastructure, and a health check of the delivery infrastructure, as well as unique integration, like we have with Oracle. We have unique integration through a partnership with Epic. So we're able to pull data specific to Epic and the application into our technology. And on the next slide, now this was a little longer. This was 75 days, but we were able to understand the source of the logon issues. We were able to provide root cause analysis of those logon issues, and they were able to implement resolution actions very, very quickly. Now, today, what they do on an ongoing basis is they're able to leverage this technology at their support desk to run a series of reports. This is a report that is looks like logon duration, because that was the issue that they were experiencing. But they run a series of reports that check sort of a health check, if you will, of the clinician experience, whether it's logon duration, whether it's session performance, and the latency from various locations, latency that might be experienced by various clinicians. So they use that on an ongoing basis to be proactive, as they call it, in managing their clinician experience. And I think we've got a little bit of time. Those are the two use cases I have. If anybody that's listening has questions on that, certainly you can email me directly. But Kiri, I think we have a number of questions that have been coming in. I see the chat, so maybe we can pivot to that. Unless you have anything to offer on that last example. I'm going to take that as a no.
Yeah, I guess that's a no. Yeah, we do have, Thomas, to your point, a lot of questions that have been coming in. This is an active group today. Let's jump right into it. First one, Brian, I think this one is directed at you, primarily because this is something that is a hot topic we hear coming out of class. What does what is the impact that speed and reliability has on clinician burnout? Not something we really talked about today, but clearly top of mind.
Yeah, I touched on it. KLAS has published that research actually fairly recently. It was a question that came from CMIOs who were struggling to get funding to really improve the effort. Like they would come back and say, hey, there's this problem, clinicians are happy. I don't want to be too crass, but the CFO says, okay, if we spend millions of dollars or whatever making them happy, what does that do for us? And they asked KLAS to kind of help quantify the return on investment for reducing burnout and improving satisfaction. So here's the numbers, long story short. About 38% of physician burnout can be attributed to IT-related issues, mainly the EHR. So there are other issues like just plain being understaffed and supply chain, whatever, but a good chunk, 38% or so, can be attributed to the EHR burnout and issues that are underlying with speed and reliability, things like that. You saw how infuriated some of those clinicians are. Okay, now what does that mean financially though? What's the impact for the health system and otherwise? When they hit a certain threshold of burnout, you have a large percentage of clinicians that are ready to move to another health system that maybe has a better running EHR, which we have seen, but it really impacts turnover. And then the turnover costs that we researched can vary anywhere from about $500,000 to $1 million for clinician turnover when you think about the recruiting costs, contracting, signing bonuses, sometimes relocation funds, and then also patients following the clinician, the physician to where they go. It's a huge cost. The nursing turnover was only about $30,000 to $50,000 for nurse turnover. The physician cost was very high, and you can, like I said, you can attribute about a third of that, a little over a third of that, to the EHR experience, which, as we know, the foundation, speed and reliability. It's a great question. But there is, you can download that report, request it from me, I can shoot it over to you. But another thing along with that I think is critical, somebody didn't ask, I thought of a second ago. I think I had a little cutout when you were asking me a question, but guys, implementation issues are big too. I published a report at KLAS. If you go to KLAS and look up implementation impact, you'll see 2 white papers I published. I did a lot of research there. What I loved about this solution is it takes 2 hours to implement, and you don't have to put it in the endpoint, and then you can get an immediate read and measurement. And so Goliath has done this for a lot of health systems that were in the ARCH Collaborative, and we'll do it for you guys if you request it. A proof of concept, because it's so easy to implement, we do it for free and just plug in and actually see what is going on do a measurement. That's one of the, if it makes sense, that's one of the steps in the speed and reliability program. But let's see how that's impacting physician burnout. I think we can get a good read into that, just looking at what the overall experience is first. Good question.
All right, Thomas, next question I think we should direct to you. What size health systems do you work with?
Some of the largest, Common Spirit, Ascension, Intermountain Health, as well as Maine Health, Southwest General. So our product scales to some of the largest health systems in the U.S. and Canada, and has a price and ease of use profile so that it can be adequately used by small community hospitals as well. So.
Oh, you killed 2 birds with 1 stone, because the next question that had come in was around Canada. They're located in Canada, and they wanted to know if you worked with health systems there. So the answer to that is clearly yes. All right. This is someone, they use Oracle today. They want to know if they can actually purchase Goliath through Oracle. Is that something that can be done?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Ryan, next question for you. You've actually answered this in a lot of different ways. In your experience with speed and reliability, what are the things that actually matter?
What are the things that what?
That actually matter. And Thomas, you probably can weigh in on this as well, because you've been working with lots of clients who are trying to address speed and reliability, and you know the things that specifically, if they go after first, have the biggest impact.
Right. I'll let you answer. I'll do a quick answer, Thomas, and let you jump into what are the things that matter. I think what they're getting at is like where the problems typically lying. I think to Thomas we alluded to earlier, oftentimes people make the mistake of pointing to the EHR vendor, and sometimes the vendor is the issue, but with the Goliath tool, and you can go armed with your conversation and have a better relationship with your vendor when you do that, but also more times it's client side. And then, and the other things that I would say matter is just, being able to find it. It varies. Like I said, the hard part here is that if you know exactly what it is, it's easy to fix. It's really just having an end-to-end view of it so you can find it. This is one of those areas that's unique from a lot of other. I led the consulting research at KLAS for years, and and the other areas of consulting and where firms that with expertise can come in and help are a little bit different than this. So they're helping with problems that are people related and workflow related, and change management related, which are tough. Technical are easy to fix, but it's just they're so siloed, and the visibility is the key. That's what I would say matters, is being able to see it. I guess brought myself to the answer. Thomas, what would you say?
I don't have a lot to add to that answer. I'm not sure I understand the question, to be honest with you. What matters when it comes to speed and reliability? I mean, speed and reliability.
Sure. All right, well, let's shift gears a little bit as far as who we work with. We mentioned this a little bit earlier in the session. Do we work with Meditech? This health system uses Meditech.
Yeah, we actually have a Meditech module. We are the only ones with a Meditech module, and have had one for years with Meditech Magic, and now a new module with Meditech Expanse. So we have quite a few Meditech health systems.
I would add to Meditech clients, if there's any on the webinar here, there's probably, if somebody asked it, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit with Meditech. A little bit of intervention goes a longer way. I think I've noticed that over the years, folks that buy Meditech sometimes have not spent as much time optimizing their infrastructure. And so coming in and just doing a small project, I mean, can really have a massive impact. So it's really fun to see Meditech clients get excited about the improvement.
Yeah, I think Expanse has been quite helpful too.
Yeah.
Well, as you can see on the screen, if you all want to contact Thomas or Ryan directly, we put their personal emails up on the slide. So feel free to grab that and reach out to them directly. As far as what's coming up next, you can attend another webinar with Ryan next month, March 27th at 2 o'clock. We're going to have a monthly series of health IT focused webinars specifically for health IT and clinical executives. So not getting into the technical weeds, but really understanding the issues that you guys face from the seats that you sit in. So next one will be on March 27th. So make sure that you attend that. And then right after this webinar ends, you're going to see a post-webinar survey pop up. Just a few questions on there. If you wouldn't mind just taking a couple minutes to fill that out. Gives us some insight into what's valuable to you and how we can make these sessions more valuable and relevant to you going forward. Thank you all for joining the session. Ryan, welcome to Goliath. Thank you for leading the session today. And Thomas, thank you for joining as well. And again, thank you to everyone who attended. We will follow up with you with recordings in the next day or so. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out at any time. All right. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.